Good afternoon and welcome. This is News First, where the people come first. Let's first take a look at your headlines for this afternoon.
Chief Government Whip Johnston Fernando says the President will not resign. Parliamentary sessions heat up today as well. Opposition leaders suggest a way to bring back foreign currency to the country.
මේ ඩොලර් ප්‍රශ්නයට ශනික විසඳුමක් ලබා ගන්න පුළුවන් අර පැන්ඩෝරා පත්‍රිකාවල සඳහන් වෙලා තිබෙන මේ රටේ ඩොලර් මංකොල්ල කාපු ඒවා ඒ තියෙන රටවල් වලින් මේ රටට ගෙනෙන්නට ඕන.
President revokes gazette on the state of emergency.
The present situation in the country is being taken up for debate in Parliament. At the beginning of the session, Speaker Mahinda Abeyewardena urged the MPs not to allow the country to fall into an anarchic situation. Now, the leader of the opposition, Sajith Premadasa, raised questions as to how the country could function in the absence of a finance minister and the finance secretary. President's Counsel Ali Sabri, who was appointed as the new finance minister, resigned yesterday, while the finance secretary Saratikala also resigned yesterday. Now, referring to the resignations, opposition leader Sajith Premadasa questioned as to who will fulfill the relevant responsibilities, adding that this could lead to anarchy. He raised questions from the government as to how will the country's finances be managed. The opposition leader also called on the parliament to formulate laws to recover the money looted, as revealed in the Pandora Papers, as that could resolve the dollar crisis in the country. Now, the parliament session was adjourned at around 10:50 this morning for 10 minutes following a heated exchange that broke out when MP Nalin Bandara was expressing his views.
තමන්ගේ පවුල ආරක්ෂා කරන්න ක්‍රියාත්මකුනේ නැහැ. දැන් අදනට ගජමිතුර කී දෙනෙක් රටබැලලා තියෙනවද? අදනට ගජමිතුර කී දෙනෙක් රටබැලලා තියෙනවද? පවුල අය කී දෙනෙක් රටබැලලා තියෙනවද? ගානේ දවසක් ගානේ මේ සභාවේ කටයුතු නතර කරනවා.
Chief Government Whip Johnston Fernando informed Parliament that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa will not resign on any circumstances.
You questioned if the president can be removed from his position. We told you that the president can resign from his position. After he resigns, the parliament can appoint a president for the remaining term. I told that parliament can appoint a president if the present president resigns. The opposition leader told the same. Yes, it is true. So you take a decision and end the debate. I suggested that we can appoint a new president if the current president resigns. Yes, it is there in the constitution. You decide that. Honorable Chief Opposition Whip, I would like to remind you, 6.9 million people voted for the president. We are clearly saying as a government, president will not resign under any circumstances. We will face this.
Now, the parliament session was adjourned for the second time today after opposition MPs displayed placards calling on the president to resign.
ධනදේශීය නිෂ්පාදනයේ ඇති රාජ්‍ය ණය සම්බන්ධතාවය අඩු කිරීම හා ලංකාවේ ණය පීඩන අවදානම් පාල මට්ටමට ගෙනීම රාජ්‍ය මූල්‍ය සභාවේ වැඩ කටයුතු කිරීම හා පහකට නතර කරනු ලැබේ. ව්‍යවසායකයන්ගේ මේයුම්
Tamil National Alliance MP President's Counsel M.A. Sumandiran called on the Parliament to go for a vote on the proclamation of the public emergency.
I raised the issue of the emergency proclamation being approved by Parliament yesterday. The Honourable Leader of the House stated that it will be put to vote today. Now, revocation of the emergency proclamation has no bearing on this. whenever emergency is proclaimed, that must be approved by Parliament. Subsequent revocation has no bearing on that. Government may be running scared to have a vote taken in Parliament, but they can't escape from the constitutional duty of having the emergency proclamation placed in Parliament and a vote taken on it. I am insisting that we put to vote the proclamation of emergency as made by the President on the 1st of April 2022.
I'd like to reply to the doubts created by Honorable Sumandran. At the party leaders meeting yesterday, Honorable Sumandran did raise this issue. And on behalf of the government, I very clearly stated that the emergency regulation will be tabled in the House today. Yes. Vote can be taken any other day. We know the constitutional provisions and we know when it will lapse. But the question was whether the emergency regulation will be placed before the House. It has been read by you, Honorable Speaker. The second regulation was last night. The Security Council, chaired by His Excellency the President, met and revoked so that it does not exist any longer from midnight last night. We know the constitutional provision. I agree with you that the emergency has been on for 2-3 days. So on that basis, we have placed the emergency regulation. The other new regulation also will be placed before you, Honorable Speaker, and you will read. We can't run government in the way you want. We can't run government in the way we will run according to the Constitution. I agreed and I assured that we will conduct the business of the House according to the Constitution, not on the whims and fancies of we all.
The opposition leader also spoke about the recently declared state of emergency in Parliament today.
අද රටේ මුදල් ඇමතිවරයෙක් නැහැ. ඊයේ මුදල් ඇමතිතුමා පත් වුණා. පත් වුණු විකසම ඇවිල්ලා මොනවද වාර්තා වගේක් ඉදිරිපත් කරා. ඊට පස්සේ ඉල්ලාසු. එතකොට පක්ෂ නායක රැස්වීම යන මොහොතේ මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශයේ ලේකම් එහෙමත් නැත්නම් භාණ්ඩාගාරයේ ලේකම්තුමා අයින් වුණා. එතකොට මේ தත්ත්වය තුල අපිට දැනගන්න කැමති කවුද රටේ මුදල් ඇමති? කවුද භාණ්ඩාගාර ලේකම්? ඒ අය නොමැති තැන තුල මේ රට අරාජික වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. රට කඩා වැටලා තියෙන්නේ. කොහොමද රටේ මූල්‍ය පාලනය, මූල්‍ය හැසිරවීම, කළමනාකරණය කොහොමද ඒක ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නේ?
The people's protest is being staged opposite the parliamentary complex today as well. Private tuition teachers from across the island were seen among the group of protesters. According to our reporters on location, security has also been beefed up in the area. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has revoked the proclamation on public emergency with effect from midnight on the 5th of April. An extraordinary gazette to this effect was issued last night. The President issued a special gazette on the 1st of April declaring a public emergency in accordance with the powers vested in the President under the provisions of the Public Security Ordinance. Sri Lankan expatriates are staging protests overseas against the prevailing economic crisis in the country.
Sri Lankans living in Sweden engaged in a protest requesting to create a conducive environment for people to live. Sri Lankans living in Alberta in Canada also engaged in a protest. A protest was staged by a group of Sri Lankans in Lubbock, Texas.
The Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has said it is closely monitoring the ongoing developments in Sri Lanka. The spokesperson of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said, and I quote, "We are closely following developments in Sri Lanka, where in the past few days, authorities announced a state of emergency and other restrictions in response to mass protests against the country's worst economic crisis in decades." Noting that the situation has worsened over the past 2 weeks, the media spokesperson also criticized the Sri Lankan authorities for what she described as excessive and unwarranted police action against peaceful protesters, as well as measures such as declaration of the state emergency, imposition of a 36-hour curfew and restricting access to social media. Such measures, she said, are aimed at preventing people from legitimately demonstrating their grievances through peaceful protests.
The power supply is being disrupted for 6 hours and 30 minutes today as well. According to the power cut schedule, groups A to L will experience a 4-hour power cut from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and a 2-hour and 30-minute power cut from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Groups P to W will experience a 4-hour power cut from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and a 2-hour and 30-minute power cut from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. Group CC1 will experience a 3-hour and 30-minute power cut from 6 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. The duration of school hours has been extended by 1 hour with effect from the 18th of April. Secretary to the Education Ministry, Professor Kapila Pereira, said this measure was taken to complete the total number of school hours from the first term of schools beginning on the 18th of April until the conclusion of the school year on the 23rd of December. He said the school timetables, including the school vacation periods, have been forwarded to the school principals.
As mentioned earlier on in the bulletin, the opposition leader also spoke about the recently declared state of emergency in the country.
I would like to associate myself with the sentiments of Honorable Sumandiran. Actually, this administration brought about emergency, curfew, banning of social media as a draconian attempt to bring in dictatorship into this country. You don't have autocracy or authoritarianism in this country. This is a democracy. The leader of the house should understand. You have to provide an explanation. Why was emergency brought in? Why was curfew enacted? Why was social media banned? What is the reason? No, you can't. You know, just because you had a mandate of 6.9 and 6.8 million votes, you can't act with impunity. You can't act with impunity. You can't behave in an arbitrary manner.
Now it's,
you can't act like a dictator.
Yeah, it's okay, right?
So you owe an explanation.
I owe and I explained to him. I explained to the whole house why it was promulgated.
Yeah.
If he doesn't understand Sinhala, I can explain in Ingirisi. If Ingirisi is wanted. ජනාධිපතිතුමාට ගේ නිවසට පාර දුන්නු අවස්ථාවේ සිට මුළු සිද්ධි මාලාවම කිව්වා. දැන් මොකද අනේ you owe an explanation කියලා. මොනවාද මේ හැසිරීම?
And that's a wrap of this edition of Lunchtime News. For the Newsfirst team, I am Azra San. We will keep you updated on what's happening in the country. Stay safe.